The top story that we are tracking right now. India has responded firmly to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recent admission that his government had no hard proof when it accused India of involvement in the killing of pro-Khalistan leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil. This, as the US State Department has confirmed, the CC1, the Indian government official allegedly involved in a plot to kill another pro-Khalistan leader, is no longer in government service. The United States also expressed satisfaction with the cooperation provided by the Indian Inquiry Committee. An Indian committee set up to examine the US case visited Washington for talks on Tuesday.
Sure. So the meeting that occurred yesterday, we being the U.S. government broadly, updated members of the Committee of Inquiry about the investigation that the United States has been conducting. We've received an update from them on the investigation that they have been conducting. It was a productive meeting, and I will leave it at that.
Did they also inform you about some of the actions they might have taken?
They did inform us that the individual who was named in the Justice Department indictment is no longer an employee of the Indian government.
Now, the visit came just as the row between India and Canada was escalating publicly. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister admitted that his government had not provided India with hard evidence, but just intelligence regarding the killing of Nijjar on Canadian soil. India's Ministry of External Affairs said that Trudeau's testimony before a public inquiry only confirmed what New Delhi has been saying from the start, that Canada has provided no evidence to support the serious allegations that it has chosen to level against India and Indian diplomats. The ministry further added that the responsibility for the damage that this cavalier behavior has caused to India-Canada relations lies with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alone. Trudeau appeared before the inquiry that is looking at the ability of institutions to detect and fend off the attempts of hostile states to meddle in Canadian affairs. Trudeau also told the inquiry that Canada asked the government of China to remove Zhao Wei, a Chinese diplomat accused of targeting Conservative MP Michael Chong, before deciding to declare Zhao quote-unquote persona non grata and kicking him out of the country. Zhao reportedly played a role in attempts to gather information on Chong's family in Hong Kong in 2021, following the MP's condemnation of Beijing's conduct. Trudeau said there was an exchange of messages with Chinese officials before Zhao was ejected. Now, Trudeau's latest testimony comes days after Canada ordered six Indian diplomats as persons of interest. In a retaliatory move, India decided to expel 6 Canadian diplomats and recalled its top diplomats from Canada.
Screenshots.
And for more on this, WION's assistant editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibal, now joins us live on the broadcast. Siddhant, first up, give me the reason for this, I wouldn't exactly call it a U-turn, but definitely a change in stance of sorts on Canada's behalf.
Well, when it comes to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's remarks and testimony yesterday, when it comes to he saying that there is no evidentiary proof, now essentially that was a bit here where he was explaining the timeline of when the matter started. He pointed out that last year ahead of the G20 summit, there was intel reports, and during the bilateral with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that matter was raised, and at that time there was only intelligence report, there was no evidentiary proof. But all in all, the crux of the matter is that the India and Canada relationship have totally collapsed, to put it like this. And essentially we know that by the end of this week, the 6 diplomats from India, the Canadian diplomats, and 6 Indian diplomats from Canada, including of course High Commissioner, will be back to their home countries, and that essentially is a drop in the diplomatic relationship. There could be more actions on the anvil by New Delhi, where we know that last time the relationship saw this kind of thrill. the Indian side had suspended visas for the Canadians. It was, of course, restarted, but this could be also on the table. New Delhi remains worried about Canadians and the Canadian government essentially giving support to criminal gangs from India. And also we know that when it comes to India's big worry, the Khalistani separatists who have been very vocal on Canadian soil, and there hasn't been any action by the Canadian government on them.
Canada had levied similar allegations on China as well not too long ago. Would you say that there is a difference in the approach Canada has accused India, so to say, when compared to China?
A very different approach when it comes to dealing with China and when it comes to dealing the relationship with India. Now, essentially, there hasn't been no expulsion per se of the Chinese diplomats by Canada, but in India's case, we know not only there is expulsion, but of course the public shrillness. The Canadian Prime Minister has been mentioning India in negative lights, whether it is the press conference on Monday or whether it is the testimony yesterday. Indian government, of course, has been saying that he's doing this primarily because he's pandering to his vote bank. We know Canada goes to election next year, and it looks like before that we will see more remarks against India by the Canadian Prime Minister.
So you would say domestic policy is the reason, politics rather, on the Prime Minister's part, Canadian Prime Minister's part, is the reason why there is a difference in approach between China and India?
Yes, and essentially we know that as India has been saying that when it comes to India's bilateral relationship and the Canadian Prime Minister's domestic compulsions, both have been mixed, and this deadly cocktail of domestic vote bank politics and bilateral relationship has led to fall in the relationship. We have seen a strong release by the Indian government issued 1 a.m. in the morning, which is very rare. And in that very strong statement, the Indian government pointed out that no evidence had been given by the Canadian side when it comes to Indian involvement in Niger killing, who of course is a listed terrorist state in India, and of course slammed the Canadian Prime Minister, saying that he himself is responsible for the fall in the bilateral relationship, which can have major impacts on trade between the two countries, people-to-people relationship, and of course Canada's Indo-Pacific policy, where India, of course, is a key focus.
Thank you so much, Siddhant Sibal, for joining us with the latest on this pertinent issue on the broadcast. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.